Hello. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm here with Mary Ardania, my co-host, and we're going to have episode 9 of Conversations, Illuminating Your Path to Wholeness. Let's become a beloved society. How do we do that? Just a reminder to everybody, we do these broadcasts live on Fridays at 10 a.m. Hawaii time, 11 a.m. Alaska time, noon Pacific, 1 p.m. Mountain, 2 p.m. Central, 3 p.m. East Coast, 8 p.m. if you're in London or GMT, and 7 a.m. in Australia. They're broadcast via YouTube and Facebook, and I think there's also a Twitter feed as well. And if you look at the text on these episodes, you should be able to find the links you need. Or you can always message us either at 907-351-3003 or questions at walkingthroughyourwalls.com. I do have the studio phone here, so I'm hoping that someone will join in and ask a live question. That's what we're really excited to do. In the meantime, we do have some questions that have been accumulated. Welcome to Amber. Yes, let's do that. Become a beloved society. Happy to have Amber in the audience today. It's always nice to have some interaction, and we very much enjoy her input. So today I was going to start, we'll start with just a tiny recap. Last week we were mentioning the chaos that we're all living in and how it's a chaos that we're experiencing both individually and collectively. And we mentioned gun deaths. And so we couldn't go into this episode without at least acknowledging the 19 children and the 2 teachers that were murdered by another gunman in our country. And so the collective pain over this event has been very, very strong. And it's a symbol that the chaos is continuing, but it also should bring you hope, because there will be a time where we can't turn away from this anymore. Perhaps this is the event that will precipitate real substantial change. And the way we're going to make real substantial change in America and in most democratic and developed countries is through the election of the people who run our government. And this year in America is going to be very pivotal. And we're already seeing good signs that the movement towards becoming a beloved society is gaining momentum. There are small things that are happening, and if you're watching them, you know what I'm talking about. Just today, there was a report released that the 5 Republican gubernatorial candidates in Michigan have all been removed from the ballot for inappropriate election fraud or something. I didn't read the whole article. So I just mentioned that as just one little piece, right? It's happening everywhere, that heart-based, truth-loving people are gaining attention. The truth does matter. And the only way we're going to become a beloved society is through embracing the real truth of who and what we are and what's happening here on this planet, both individually and collectively. So I wanted to share this before we're going to get into Don Miguel's 4 agreements again, but before we get into that, I wanted to just share this quote from my very favorite astrologer, Lorna Bevins. She's talking about June, but she's also talking in a much larger sense, where I got this quote from. This is the endgame phase of the very necessary separation of worlds. Pluto's entry into Aquarius, which begins in 2023, heralds the winds of change that will lead to a whole-scale transformation. This window of time, February 2023 to November 2024, is the beginning of the end of the overriding, controlling force that has ruled humanity for millennia. In its wake, Legacy's Pluto will be the final crumbling of the dark agenda. And so I wanted to share that because I really feel as if that sums up the energy that is coming. We may not be feeling that energy quite yet, but what's happening right now is we are disassembling the things that need to be disassembled so that we can begin building the new. And we are at the very end of the disassembling part, right? Pluto is, as we've discussed, it's death and destruction. It's also birth and regeneration. And so this is the where the teeter totters, right? Where the teeter totters. We're at that apex. We're going to flip it. It's happening. So while these days are extremely painful, and as Nanette has shared, that last shooting has really gotten to her. Now the death rate of children is higher than those killed in car accidents, right? The death of children at the hand of guns is higher now than it is in car accidents. Okay, I'm not going to pick up the phone because that is not somebody calling in for the broadcast. So we'll let them go to voicemail. So and welcome to Nanette to the audience. We're glad to have you here as well. So certainly the astrology of the United States with its Pluto return on top of, right? So what I just read you is the collective for everyone. And then when you layer on top of it the fact that the United States is having its own Pluto return, I'm really hoping that these November midterms will be the setup for us to start the work that Lorna mentions in February. And also remember that astrological time, universal time, doesn't necessarily adhere precisely to the calendar. So the influence of what she talks about happening in February 2023 may already be building and in place in November of 2022. We can certainly hope for that, right? So we can take some comfort in that, but we need to remember that each of us can choose to do everything that we can to create a beloved society, all the while knowing that until we do, the collective will remain in this sort of disheveled state that we see it. So it's up to each of us, and we can wait till it seems like more people are on board, or we can start now on our own. I know that's what I'm choosing to do. And one of the things that's really become apparent to me, because of the way I've had to spend the last few weeks interacting with the governments, my local governments, there's 3 of them. That there's the city that we live outside of, but that was their road. There was the state, whose stuff is what came down onto the road. And then there's the borough or the county that we live in, who's responsible for responding to the citizens who have been impacted. We really need to do better, guys. If what I've gone through and my neighbors have gone through is any representation of the way government functions everywhere else, we need to do way better. We really do. We need better ways of collecting data from people who are impacted in disasters. There need to be better systems in place. The disregard with which we were treated was outrageous. And I can only imagine that the people involved in large disasters must feel it exponentially more than what I experienced. I remember back when Bush was president, there was a hurricane. I think it was in Texas, and there was a little boy. They were in a stadium, and there was a little boy, and I just remember he was like, "We need help," and my God, yeah, they did, and everybody who's gone through that has needed help, and I really think that the government has probably not done a very good job for any of them. So this again is a part of how do we become a beloved society? We're responsible for all these things in a certain fashion, right? It's our civic duty to care about elections and to go to the poll and to make our choices known so that people are treated the way we believe they should be treated. So it's a big, I'm on a big soapbox at the moment. I apologize, but I think we need to give voice to it. Injustice, and I want to talk about, so there's been some people that have observed that, I've been a little angry a couple of times this week, in my bringing forward things to these government people. Injustice should be enraging or angering. There is such a thing as righteous anger, and although you will always hear me speak against anger in general, I think unregulated anger can be very dangerous, primarily because if we let the body take over, we may end up acting out in ways that are not what we want to do, right? Many police arrests involve people that have allowed their bodies and their anger to take over and be out of their minds, basically. And often the hardest words to recover from are words that are said in anger. So if we're trying to become a beloved society, we need to be paying attention to how we're expressing ourselves and doing our best to be kind and compassionate when we're interacting, not only with ourselves, but with others as well. And if you're expressing an indignation or an anger over an injustice, you just need to be able to keep yourself in check and do it in a way that is actually heart-based. And we need to put ourselves first when we're doing this. And that's because in a very real sense, as we are expressing ourselves in the world, we are all that there is. The rest of it is a hologram to us. It's a hologram we're all participating in, but we are creating from our decisions and our mind and our thoughts about life what we experience. We're playing a much bigger hand in what we experience than we realize most of the time. So it's a magical co-creation, but we are really responsible for what we bring to it. And so in order to build a beloved society, we really need to grasp that and work with it. I like the term Mary used last week, emotional littering, because it's really important that for example, my anger about the road, that I not treat people inappropriately. Right. So last night I was very angry because they've made more changes and they've made it even more difficult now for some people, even though the road is open. Nobody who uses a bicycle or walks as their primary method of transportation is going to be permitted to use the road, which means there are people who can't go to their night jobs still now. They were all excited because the road was opening, and now we're back to disappointment because they can't get through. And in my text last night, I typed a lot of stuff, and then I read it, and it was like, no, I don't need to say any of that. And I took all the stuff that would have been emotional littering back out of it, and I stuck to the point of these people need help. They need attention. This is not a way to treat them. And I beseech you to remedy the situation. Amber says emotional littering is a good one.
That term comes from Vito Mucci. Just got to give credit where credit's due.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And Amber also comments, unfortunately, our politicians are more concerned with lining their pockets with corporate money than the people who put them in office. And so this was partially my point, Amber, is that we need to change the entire structure. We need to get the money out. Like, we can all see it. We can all see what has to happen. And I think that up until now, we've all sort of relied on somebody else is going to fix that. And I think what we're all beginning to see is that if not me, who? If not now, when? Right? When we identify these things, we have to be able to, if we can, if our lives allow us, because a lot of people are living lives of just making it to day, so there's not a lot of extra bandwidth in those people's lives to also take on the issues of fixing how broken our system is, our political system and our governmental system and all of that. But for those of us who do have the time, it's imperative that we make an effort, that we become civically engaged, in addition to being spiritually engaged in what's happening. Mary, you've got anything to add? Or
Yeah, I have something I would like to say.
good.
Two things. One is the righteous anger can be a fuel that we use um, to make change, but yes, we have to use it as a fuel without letting it run amok in us. And that can be easier said than done. And Linda, that I had my own incident this past week of a little bit of anger running away with me for a minute or two. And I usually catch myself pretty quickly and try to make amends and move forward, and I did that. But it just shows me that it's a very sensitive time right now. People are dealing with a lot, and frankly, it's like we're all in pressure cookers of however, whatever your pressure cooker is. I said to someone else, in a world of pressure cookers, we have to try to be Instapots. But the other thing I really want to say is that honestly, the first 16 minutes of this podcast have not made me feel very hopeful. They've made me feel very exhausted because I feel like I've been trying to do this work, for decades now. And instead of going forward, we're going backwards. That's how I feel. Like things were to a certain point, and now it's like there were these people just waiting in the wings to try to take away all of our hard won wins. That's what I was thinking. And it's upsetting. And, back to the righteous indignation. But the thing I want to contribute here for a moment is that for me, what I try to do is keep my energy out of the dumpster fire however I can. So you see my rainbow hearts. I don't wear this dress to work very much because I think it's pushing the bounds of professionalism. I think it looks a little bit like pajamas, but I work at a law school, but we're between sessions and I'm wearing my, rainbow heart dress because it makes me super happy. And I saw this cup. I don't think I showed it before, did I?
You
I
might have,
found
but
it.
it's worth a show again.
I
I
found
love
it
it.
in CVS for $7. It says be happy and the backwardsness. It's a cute little bee with the flower
Yep,
and the flowers.
yep,
So yes, this is my water cup here at my job at the law firm. And some people like it and they're like, oh, that's so cute. And so, it's keeping my energy up and it helps with keeping up other people's energy too. When you know, I wear little tights that have little cat heads on the knees.
right,
So, they peek over the top of my boots. So people see them and they're like, oh, that's cute. So it's like, it's a way of spreading cheer
right.
and spreading cheer to my loved ones. Um, you know, and the people I encounter in the day,
Right.
you know, sometimes strangers on the street, like the
Right.
things I'm wearing. And just to know that I've brightened other people's days
Yep.
while, you know, it's all for me. I need my be
Yep.
happy
Yep.
cup, you know.
Yep.
So that to me is really important. Like taking notice that the energy can be really freaking hard and draining and
Right.
oppressive. And
Right.
it's so important to figure out the things you can do to make it better, you know?
Right.
Um, yeah.
Right. Well, I'm sorry that at the beginning it was not that I wasn't able to shine the light in such a way that gave you some hope.
No, it's
Um,
okay. It wasn't that. It's just what I said.
but
I feel
I'm
discouraged.
right, right, and I want to acknowledge that. I think that it's very easy to feel discouraged right now, because for some of us, we've been marching and demonstrating on some of these issues since before we could even vote.
Yes.
You know, some of us have started when we were teenagers,
Yes.
long before we could vote. So I
Yes.
understand the discouragement, and I
I know.
understand the wanting to just turn away and not participate. But
I
I
don't want to turn away.
I want people to take hope in the fact that it isn't going to stay hard like this forever. We are turning it around, even though it doesn't look like it. And we just need to hang on for a little while longer, you know? I know it's sort of that, and I don't like using that "hang on" because it's more of a clutching, but, uh, but change is coming, and it's good change. It is good change. It doesn't look like it right now. It looks like, it looks like people with private agendas and non-supportive agendas are winning. But for example, right, thank you, Amber. It will turn around. This too shall pass. And she also acknowledges she loves your dress too, in case you didn't see that comment, Mary.
Yeah, I saw
Um,
it.
there's a gentleman by the name of Frank Schaefer who, uh, on May 4th of this year, did a just under 20-minute interview. And Frank Schaefer, for those of you who do not realize it, was a young man back in the 70s when the real anti-abortion movement first started. And everybody, I believe, in this country should watch this or listen to this video interview of Frank Schaefer, because he's somebody who helped found that movement and start that movement and make that movement what it is. And now he's trying to take it down because he's woken up to what the real agenda was. And in this video, he basically talks about how they don't care about the babies. It's not about the babies. It's
Oh,
about control and
yeah,
money. It's not about the babies at all.
yeah,
Because, as he very aptly points out, there's never any funding for the babies.
right.
There's never any funding for there's not even funding for mother's health while they're carrying the baby that they've been forced to keep. So, and I don't want to get into this in great detail, but it when I saw that interview, I recognized it for what I believe it to be, a cornerstone of the turning point, right? When somebody who founded this movement is ready to come out and say, hey, this movement, folks, is not what you think it is, and wake up to that. And I regret my participation, and I'm going to do everything I can to turn this around. I think it's worth taking note of.
Yeah.
So I don't want to spend any more time on this. I want to get on back to a little deeper discussion of the 4 agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, because
Let's do that.
these 4 agreements really do, I think, give people a very simple framework It's just 4 things to kind of keep track of. But within that framework, you get, I believe, extreme emotional relief and support.
I totally agree. I keep telling certain people who I've been talking to about these kinds of things, like, read the 4 agreements, read the 4 agreements. They're like, I'm tired of people telling me to read that. But I think I should just send them that one page, like you said, because you don't even have to read the whole thing. It's great to read the whole thing, but that one page Linda mentioned that just has a paragraph about each of them,
Right.
magic.
Right, right, right. And so, for those of you who are listening, if you just go to Google and Google the 4 agreements, you probably don't need to know it's Don Miguel Ruiz, but if you put in the 4 agreements and click on images, you will instantly find a variety of images that have taken the 4 agreements. And, you can buy posters and all kinds of things, but you can find the words and you can do a screenshot and you can put it on your phone. You can make it your wallpaper. And so briefly, let's just go back through them again. Be impeccable with your word. Don't take anything personally. Don't make assumptions, and always do your best. Now, the 2 that I believe are really pivotal is don't take anything personally and don't make assumptions. Those 2, if you can integrate the wisdom within them into your psyche, your life will become instantly so much easier and pleasant. So let's take the don't think things personally. And Amber is also in agreement about the 4 agreements. Let's take the notion of not taking things personally. First, I'll read the short paragraph that goes with it from Don Miguel. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do is a result of their own dream or perception of their rules. We all make rules about how things should be. But when you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. So let's take an example. I had dinner a few weeks ago with some friends, and their mother was there. So this is a woman in her 90s, I believe. And the discussion of the day at their house had been how acceptance was what we should work for. That if we could just get to acceptance, then everything would be okay. And I waded in to the discussion and suggested that that was really not quite enough. That we really needed to get to love. Because if you were to look at the energetic scale that David Hawkins put together, the map of consciousness, you would see that acceptance is very low on the frequency chart. It's down, I think, around 200. And if we're trying to be at love or above, we need to be at 500. And so I was attempting to move the conversation. I didn't get anywhere, by the way, but it was an interesting evening. And at the end of the evening, the mom said to me, when you sat down, I just thought you were the biggest flake. And then she proceeded to say, but you're okay. You just need to relax. And I had to laugh because the whole conversation was about acceptance. And yet when I sat down, she was not accepting, she was judging. And so I could, in that moment, have had my feelings hurt. And many people might have had their feelings hurt to hear that, well, when you sat down, I just thought you were a big flake. You were like, she needs help. But because I am practiced in the 4 agreements, I didn't take it personally. I understood that her words were not a reflection of me. Her words were her reflection of me.
And
They
her
were,
making assumptions.
and her making assumptions, absolutely, and probably not her being impeccable with her word, nor doing her best. So, but those things didn't occur to me. But really, it was just a matter of recognizing that the way she described me, that was her. And understanding that what happens is when we are interacting with other people is that we take them in, and then we do whatever we're going to do with it in terms of how we respond. And how we're responding is really not about them. It's about us and what we've taken in and what we've decided to do with it. And this of the 4 is really, I don't know, don't make assumptions is also extremely powerful. They are both really, really powerful concepts. And I do believe that anybody who integrates the concepts here into their daily lives and into their psyches will find life to be much easier to handle.
It will change your life. That's what I have to say to that.
Right. Amber says it sounds like the lady who said that is the one who needs to relax. Well, there you go. And that's why it's a reflection of her. That's how you know it's a reflection of her, because it's not about me. It's her opinion. It was her judgment. It was her decision that I was these things. It was her choice to say those things to me as well. So Mary, do you have an example you can think of? Something like that?
I'm thinking it's hard because sometimes when you have it really integrated, and if something hasn't happened recently, it's hard to think of something specific. But I know that, which one are we talking about? Don't take things personally.
Yeah.
It just helps a lot because it's not even just those things where someone's talking to me personally, but like life and things happen, and don't take that personally, I don't know. I don't have any specific examples unless you want to talk about people on the subway acting badly or something, subway, trolley. It's not a subway anymore. Yeah, no, nothing specific.
Okay. All right. And just a reminder, if you're out in the audience and would like to call in and participate in the conversation, please call 1-907-351-3003, and we will put you on speakerphone and you can join us in the studio.
And ask your questions live in real time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the other really of the 4, my favorite, is don't make assumptions. And this paragraph reads, find the quiet courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicate with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstandings, sadness, and drama. With just this one agreement, you can completely transform your life. And that is also very, very true.
So true. And how much in life, it's like we've been trained not to ask questions, and we're just supposed to sort of try to read each other's minds or expect them to intuit what we want. It's crazy. And just saying, hey, I'm confused, or even just like with my work, when I would have too much stuff to do in the allotted time, and just to go to my boss and say, hey, which of these three urgent things is more important? You know, like you prioritize, it's your job. And I'll do what you tell me because, you know, even little things like that, let alone in a relationship and boundaries and all that stuff. This one covers so much that most people are dysfunctional about in life. And I know I
Absolutely.
jumped in, but
No,
take it
that's,
away, Linda.
yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you, Mary. Um, I think if you were to uh, try to pay attention to each assumption that you make about something or someone, you would find that many of us spend most of our days in assumptions. So someone doesn't call, we make an assumption they don't care. Later we find out they're dead. You know, I mean, there's all kinds of shocks that we go through because we've made assumptions rather than actually finding out. And sometimes we make the assumptions and we don't reach out because we don't want to know, because it we don't want to experience the emotional shock that we're afraid is waiting for us. But all of those choices really are not helping us to feel good or to in any way help to build a beloved society. Um, so Amber is confessing that she's really bad about making assumptions. I just saw a movie the other day, and I think it's worth sharing. If you haven't seen the movie Guilt Trip, it's it was, I think, written and produced by Barbara Streisand and Seth Rogen, and they are the lead actors. He is her son in this movie, and she is a classic Jewish mom, if you know what that means. And there's no judgment. I have no judgment about that. It's a cultural thing. It's a very cultural thing. And I'll share a joke that is a very cultured Jewish joke. The mom gives the son a blue shirt and a yellow shirt for his birthday. And she says, go, put him on. So he goes up and he puts the yellow shirt on and he comes down. And she says, so what? You didn't like the blue one? It's really, it is the way almost every Jewish family I've ever been around has worked. If there is a matriarch figurehead in the house. So in the movie, Seth has moved from the East Coast to the West Coast as far away as he could get from his mother to go to college. And the mother, for something like 20 or 30 years, has believed that he moved to the college to get away from her. And this is what she tells people. And she's carried that with her for 30 years, it seems like, in the movie. And they're on a road trip together. And at one point, he says to her, Ma, remember when I was a little kid and I always wanted to, be a scientist and play with chemicals and do all that. And she was like, yeah, I remember. And he goes, Ma, I went to the college, the best college in the country that would allow me to do that. And for 30 years, she believed he'd moved there to get away from her. And she'd allowed those feelings to influence her for 30 years, when in fact, his choice of college had nothing to do with her, everything to do with him, everything to do with him.
Interesting.
And it didn't diminish his love for her. He was not an unloving Jewish son. It wasn't anything of what she had carried in her head and in her heart for 30 years. That, to me, is a perfect example of the kind of damage a misplaced assumption can create. And we make assumptions at every level all day long about all kinds of things. and think of what we might be carrying with us that is absolutely erroneous.
Honestly, just questioning your assumptions is a good practice in itself. Like what I just thought of right now is bigotry. You know, we make assumptions about people based on how they look, what they're wearing, all sorts of things like that. And if you just stop for a second and say, how much of this has anything to do with the reality of the person in the situation in front of me? You know, we're always sort of refracting our whole life through our whole life. Where every experience that comes up, we're looking at it through the mirrors and the stories. And, you know, if we just stop, let go of the story, and be present in the moment with the present thing that's happening or the present situation,
Right.
that's really what not making assumptions is about.
Right.
Allowing the present moment to have its integrity separate from everything else, you know,
Right.
and then we can kind of live freshly
Right.
instead of following an ancient script,
Right.
you know?
Yes. 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 And it also has to do with when people are talking, and it loops back to don't take things personally, right? Because what'll happen is someone will say something, and the first thing that we'll do is we'll assume something about what they said, and then we take it personally. And so if we can break ourselves of these patterns, we can be a lot happier. And it's really very easy.
And a
When someone
relief.
yells at you.
It's such a relief. It's
Yeah.
like there's all this mental energy that we spend on
Right.
these patterns of taking things personally and making assumptions. And it's like we sit here grinding, and you can just let that all go and
Right.
breathe and be like, okay, you know, and assume. Somebody told me, I think I read somewhere, somebody's boyfriend said, what if you just assume that everything is okay unless someone tells you there's a problem,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like, you know, how about if we wait until people tell us what's on their mind before we assume we did something wrong or they hate us?
Right. 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 So I think of the story with my aunt, my drunk aunt that used to wait up for me when I would come home from college and then beat the crap out of me. Um, she was filled with assumptions, right? Absolutely filled with assumptions. And she would wait there, and then she would dump all of those assumptions on me, and use them as a way to justify her hitting me. And I would take it all personally. And it wasn't until some of you have heard this story. It wasn't until one day that I learned some things in my college psych class, and instead of trying to argue with her and defend myself, I agreed with her. I just allowed her to to be right in what she was saying. And many of us have probably experienced this when someone says something to us and we argue with the person, it enrages them because they're believing that they are right, and our arguing with them is telling them that we think they're wrong, and we may very well think they're wrong, but it enrages them to a degree where they then feel that they have to ratchet it up to another level and hit or punch or whatever the physical manifestation of their anger is going to be. But if we use that as that the aunt thing as an example, when I would walk in and she would dump this whole litany of things that I had done wrong, those were all assumptions on her part, because there wasn't any actual real discussion going on. There was no real attempt to solve any problems all that had happened in this relationship was I had become an outlet for her to express her anger. And so this woman would, live her day drinking, getting all riled up about some story she has in her mind, some assumption she's made about me or someone else. And by the time I would get home at night, she would just be on fire, ready to just let all this anger out and use me as her vehicle for doing that. And there are many, many people in the world that are doing that every day and living in that kind of a dynamic. And the only way to break it is to become within yourself able to say, I'm sorry, I don't accept your assumptions, and I'm not going to take personally what you're saying. And you break the engagement. And when you break the engagement, it does allow you to change the relationship. You can't change the relationship if you continue looping in the same patterns over and over. Amber says, we need to watch our thoughts and catch ourselves making assumptions and judgments. I've been doing that and it's helping. That's great, Amber. And thank you for sharing that. It really is true that if you are experiencing unhappiness in your life, if things are not going the way you want them to go, the only way that you can change things is to change yourself and what you're doing. It is impossible to change your experience of life without changing your own attitudes and assumptions that you're having and hopefully not having.
Which is really the only thing we have control over: ourselves, our assumptions, our actions, our behaviors.
Right.
To
Right.
change our lives, that's all we really can do, is like change ourselves. And
Right.
I was going to say, not as an example of me changing myself, but the assumptions thing. My ex-husband, I was married once, and he gave me the silent treatment for 2 entire weeks based on an assumption. I came home late, and he assumed that I was with my gay best friend who he had decided he hated. And I wasn't with him. I was with my female best friend who he didn't hate at a music festival up on the Hudson River. It was when I lived in New York. So, it took like trains and things to get home. It was anyway. So silent treatment, 2 weeks based on a completely erroneous assumption. And I sort of decided I didn't care. And I just gave him the silent treatment back, because what are you going to do? We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, and I wasn't going to, after I tried to engage him, I'm like, okay, fine, and that's part of why we didn't stay married. But like, people can still make assumptions about you. And that's when you get to the don't take things personally part, right?
Right.
I had not yet read the 4 agreements back in those days, or the whole situation might have been at least experienced differently on my behalf. But it really is a great way to shift the energy of life. Don't take things personally. And that other one we talked about,
Right.
don't
Right.
make
Don't make
assumptions.
assumptions.
Those 2 in themselves.
Right.
The other 2 are great too. Are we going to talk about them now?
Yes. 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 I was going to say there's well, I lost that thought. Oh, let's go back to this. Okay.
I'm sorry.
No. It wasn't you. It wasn't you at all. It was a tangent. It was tangential to what we were talking about. And it might be applicable in a moment or two. So the other 2 agreements, let's touch on both of those. We've only got almost 11 minutes left, so I'm shocked at how fast the time has gone. Be impeccable with your word. Speak with integrity. Say only what you mean. Avoid using words to speak against yourself or to gossip about others. Use the power of your word to offer love Never use it to cause fear or pain in another or yourself. And then always do your best. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It'll be different when you're healthy as opposed to when you're sick. Under any circumstance, simply do your best, and you will avoid self-judgment, self-abuse, and regret. And I don't know how to say them any better, right? That they are now it is actually human nature to try to be doing our best. It's in our nature. We don't try to be bad unless something has happened to our wiring, unless we are very, very broken human beings. We don't try to be bad. We're always trying to do our best. And as he says, our best is going to be different from day to day. If we wake up and we're not feeling well, or we're out of sorts, or maybe we've lost a dear friend or family member, or a pet family member, which is kind of covered in family member, but we may not be in a good mood. And so our best that day may not be as good as our best on a day when we're in a good mood. But if you're always attempting to live your soul purpose, which is why you're here, right? And to not get sidetracked into notions that don't apply, right? We're all here for a reason. We all have the same soul purpose, to create heaven on earth. How we manifest that individually is our own choice. But many people are not even calculating that into their daily lives. So we can escalate the advancement of becoming a beloved society by embracing these notions of always doing our best, always trying. And a question that you can ask yourself when you're having an interaction with someone that's difficult, with someone that's perhaps making assumptions, or you're being tempted to make assumptions, you can ask yourself, what does this have to do with my soul purpose? And if you pause for a minute and listen, you'll get an answer. And chances are, if you're in some kind of exchange like that, the answer is going to be, it doesn't have anything to do with it. And get away from it. Leave it alone. Drop it. Let it go. Let it be. It's not yours, right? We go through life thinking that everything we see and every problem that happens is ours to somehow deal with or address. But that's really not the case. You know, we can make ourselves a whole lot happier by just, letting some of that peripheral stuff go, because it's not ours. You know, the fact that we can see what happened at that school in Texas, and the fact that we can see what's happening in the Ukraine, doesn't necessarily mean that these are our problems to solve. It's you have to discover whether or not your mission is to go do international peace work. And maybe it is your mission to solve. But it's not going to be both your mission to solve the Ukraine thing and your mission to solve the gun thing. Right now, if you think that that's the case, you're spreading yourself too thin, and you're fracturing your focus. Because the most important thing is living your soul purpose in the place that you are, in the moment that you're in, because there really isn't anything else. And so in that moment, remembering to try and do your best and be impeccable with your word, right? Choosing to not say the first thing that occurs to you, especially in moments of anger or passion.
Yeah. To me, that's a big one. A lot of people say really hurtful, cruel things, and they say them to people that they allegedly love in their relationships. I see that all the time, and I'm like, how do you do that? I call it going for the jugular. You say the most hurtful thing you can. I don't do that. I never do that. And it's partly because I don't want anybody to do that to me. I'm a really sensitive person. So the be impeccable with your word thing, one of the really important parts of that to me is to yourself too. Like, don't be mean to yourself with your words. A lot of us tend to be very mean to ourselves with our words. All that negative self-talk, a lot of us have a track going on all the time with everything that's wrong. And so it's also why we make assumptions and judgments about other people, because we're making them about ourselves all day long, every day. And
Right.
it's partly the ego trying to take care of us by making sure that nobody else sees the shortfalls and judgments about ourselves. But that's another thing that, letting go of that stuff helps a lot. I did some work around letting go of the negative self-talk, and I don't do that anymore. I just
Right.
I don't do it. I don't play that game. I talk to myself the way I would talk to a beloved child, a beloved pet, my best friend,
Right.
because I'm all those things to myself. Yeah, sure,
Right.
I'm my own pet.
Right.
It's like, and to me also with the whole like Texas and Ukraine and everything, and there's so much going on in the world, and it really can be overwhelming, as I said at the beginning of this call. And one of the things that I do is just narrow my focus to the here and now. It doesn't mean I don't care about those things, and I certainly will make my voice heard in ways that I can when I can. But on the day to day, what I am focused on is my yard and what's in my yard.
Right.
I was going to get coffee with my friend here in the library, and the security guard across the street at the bank, like, he said hi, and I said hi, and she said hi. She said something about, I mean, she never said hi to him before. I'm like, oh, I say hi to him every day. And it's like little things like that. Say
Right.
hi to the security guard.
Right.
Say hi to, the janitor at the building. Like sometimes
Right.
he's cleaning outside. I always say hi, how you doing? It
Right.
just gives us connections in our world that create the network of love. And
Right.
for me, that's what it's about. The network of love. And
Right.
the point is to create the network of love and expand it as much as we can. And that's how we affect Texas and the Ukraine. You
Right.
know,
Right.
Everything is connected. And the more of us who are focusing on creating and tending and nurturing
Right.
our network of
Right.
love,
Right.
whether it's saying hi to the security guard or taking my Be Happy cup when I'm
Right.
proctoring a final exam so people can go, oh, that's funny. You know,
Yeah.
that's how I do it.
Thank you, Mary. We've got about 2 minutes left, and I want to acknowledge a share that Amber said. I think we can help heal a lot through meditation because we share a mind. And I tie that to what you just said, Mary, because if we each were to spend even 3 minutes a day in meditation, connecting to that energy, we are all one and we are one mind. Nanette also shared, to thy own self be true, because ultimately, as I will always say, there isn't anything out here,
Right.
right? It is all coming from this being, your
I,
being, my being,
yeah, I
in each
call
of
it
our
the
cases.
all in all. To me, that helps conceptualize it. The
Right,
all in all.
right, right. So we've got just a minute left. I want to thank the ladies that were here today, Amber and Nanette, for commenting. I want to thank everybody that was watching. We got up to 7 viewers at one point live.
Right?
Um,
That's our
I,
most so far.
I'd like to encourage you all to consider calling in live with a question or even a contribution to the discussion. We can also, if there's anybody out there that would actually like to come on camera, we can do that too. So 907-351-3003. You can always text or call that number 24 hours a day and leave a message if you don't reach me. You can email us at questions@walkingthroughyourwalls.com. You can email Mary at marylaughsloud@gmail.com. And we'll be here next week. We do have a couple of questions that went unanswered this week, so we'll get to them next week. Thank you so much again. Namaste.
Yes, thank you all.
Much love.